Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Today in True Crime and Portraits podcast. I'm your host, Jane Flowers. Today's episode is a true crime story about the Greenwood Police Department located at 406 Main Street in Greenwood, Mississippi, and how they are protecting organized criminals that are running the judicial system by not investigating them and their involvement with identity theft associated with a breach of fiduciary I have with my trust fund at Melton Law firm. My personal investigation into my breach of fiduciary I have with my trust fund led me to the Jackson Police Department located at 327 East Pascagoula Street in Jackson, Mississippi, zip code 39205. I contacted them and asked to be referred to a detective who could investigate my findings I have with my breach of fiduciary I have with my trust fund. I spoke to Detective Owen about my case, and he would later investigate my case for about 3 weeks. Then he told me that there was not much that he could do about what happened, and he was going to go ahead and pass the case over to the Greenwood Police Department because they are in control of the case, because that's where it originates. Why this police officer would not contact the FBI or the Secret Service and ask them to help him investigate my case any further is beyond me. I wonder a lot sometimes if maybe he got paid off to stop the investigation and move it on to Greenwood, where they would later on, just 4 weeks after they took my case, completely stop the investigation. The police in Mississippi didn't handle my case in a professional manner, in my opinion, at different times throughout the investigation. I felt like some of the people involved in my investigation were most definitely treating me like I was a criminal. Here I am with this bank statement that I got from my sister last year, and on the bank statement is my sister's name and my mother's name, along with another woman's social security number that my mother was using with Trustmark Bank in Greenwood, Mississippi, to open up a fraudulent bank account in 2001. I told the detective in Jackson, Mississippi about the criminal activity associated with my breach of fiduciary I have with my trust, and you would think that he would contact the Secret Service and get them involved by having them investigate further, because they can easily contact the Social Security Department and find out if that's another person's social security number my mother was using with a fraudulent bank account joint with her daughter, Claire Flowers, and see who the social security number belongs to. Then they could take further steps in subpoenaing the bank for information on the bank account that my mother had opened with this other person's social security number. There are many steps that these police officers could have taken in my investigation that would have pushed it forward so they could get indictments on white-collar attorneys using my mother's name with identity theft. But Detective Owen with the Jackson, Mississippi Police Department wasn't doing his job. Instead, he prolonged my case from the last week of January into the middle of February 2020. Around the middle of February, I had already received a letter by mail from the Attorney General's office in Jackson, Mississippi, and in the letter it stated that prosecuting attorney Eric Ray had ruled that there was no criminal activity being conducted with my case. My case with the breach of fiduciary I have with my trust fund that the Jackson, Mississippi Attorney General's office was investigating was ruled over by prosecuting attorney Eric Ray, and it took him about 3 weeks for the Attorney General's office to decide that there was no criminal activity being conducted with my trust fund or my mother's name that I know was used with identity theft by white-collar attorneys at Melton Law Firm and Trustmark Bank. I am the victim here, and in my opinion, I was treated like a criminal. Later, Detective Owen Wells called Trustmark Bank in Jackson, Mississippi, per my request, and spoke to the fraud investigator for Trustmark Bank that goes by the name of Doug Winstead. The reason being for this is because he had jurisdiction in the county that the main Trustmark Bank was located in Jackson, Mississippi. Trustmark Bank in Greenwood, Mississippi said to me that I should have any records associated with my mother's name in this bank account, that I would have to contact the main Trustmark Bank in Jackson, Mississippi to find out any information about that bank account if I needed, because they had nothing on file. So I told the detective in Jackson, could he please speak to Trustmark Bank's fraud investigator, Doug Winstead, for me, because when I spoke to him over the phone, he screamed and yelled at me while he was very verbally aggressive during the phone conversation. I suspected the detective would not get the same treatment that I received from this Trustmark Bank fraud investigator. And my assumption was correct. The detective wasn't screamed at, and he was also did not have the phone hung up in his face. I asked the detective if this happened for him, and he said no. I said, well, you're lucky then, because it did for me. The detective, Doug Winstead, was asking me during our conversation what I knew about this person's Social Security number and my mother's name attached to it. Doug wanted to ask all the questions and have me answer, so he said to me. So instead of me being able to ask questions about my mother's involvement with this other person's Social Security number that she had on a joint bank account with my sister at Trustmark Bank, the fraud investigator said I had no right to ask any questions during our conversation, and he treated me like I was a criminal. He told me over the phone that he was going to ask all the questions and I was going to answer, and that was it, and then I could hang up afterwards. But when he was speaking to me and telling me this, he was also screaming at it towards me over the phone very aggressively. Afterwards, when I heard this from his mouth, I was very disgusted and confused as to why he was treating me this way. But at the time, I was unknowing the severity of my mother and attorney Floyd Melton Jr.'s embezzling from my trust with another person's Social Security number. At the time, I thought the Social Security number she used was in actuality my tax ID number to my trust fund that was withheld from me in the final accounting when it was closed March of 2007 by Floyd Melton Jr. at Melton Law Firm in Greenwood, Mississippi. In the beginning of my investigation into my breach of fiduciary I have with my trust, I didn't understand the severity of my mother embezzling from my trust fund. I originally thought that she and attorney Floyd Melton Jr. withheld my tax ID number from me, and instead of this Social Security number that my mother was using, it was in actuality my tax ID number. Later, I would found out that it was not my tax ID number, and it was indeed another person's Social Security number, and that person was still alive. You know, I shouldn't have to be investigating my case, and the police should be checking into this stuff. Why should I have to be doing their job for them? If a police officer can't do his job, then do you really think that he is a police officer? I would think not. I called criminal detective Owen Wells and asked him to send my case to the Secret Service or FBI and have them assist him in his investigation, and he refused to do that. Eventually, my case was sent to the Greenwood, Mississippi Police Department located at 406 Main Street with zip code 38930 in the middle of February 2020. My case was then referred to Detective Layton of the Greenwood Police Department. Detective Layton also had an assistant helping him with the case. His assistant's name is Detective Miss McKinnon. I sent over the information about the bank account that my mother opened with this other person's Social Security number to Detective Layton in an email. He got all the information about my search with the Department of Treasury and this other person's Social Security number, my mother, Brenda B. Flowers, attorney Floyd Melton Jr., and Trustmark Bank were using with identity theft and embezzlement. Detective Layton investigated my case for about 4 weeks, and then he refused to investigate it any further. He would not return most of my phone calls. It was hard for me to get in touch with him. Towards the end of the investigation, around the first week of March, he told me that he had spoken to attorney Floyd Melton III at Melton Law Firm in Greenwood, Mississippi, and he told him that I had a bank statement with my mother's name on it and another person's Social Security number that my mom was supposedly using. Detective Layton told me that attorney Floyd Melton III told him that what I had was a typo on my bank statement and that he believes attorney Floyd Melton III that it is just a typo, meaning the Social Security number is a typo that I have on a bank statement with my mom's name that she had joint with my sister Claire Flowers. Detective Layton said he was also told by attorney Floyd Melton III that I was just trying to get information about my mother's estate and do not help her because she is also crazy. Then Detective Layton went to the U.S. Attorney's Office in Greenwood, Mississippi, and spoke to U.S. Attorney Tim Jones about my case. Tim Jones agreed with attorney Floyd Melton III that it was just a typo, and I was just trying to find out information about my mother's estate that I had no right to have information about to begin with. Detective Layton came back to me and said, "I'm sorry, but we're just going to have to close your case because that's a typo on that bank statement." I was told it was a typo by U.S. Attorney Tim Jones for the U.S. Attorney's Office in Greenwood, Mississippi. He also stated that attorney Floyd Melton III, who is over your mother's estate, Jane, said the same thing, that you're just crazy and you're just trying to find out information about your mother's estate, and it's a typo. To begin with, I'm not crazy. I asked Detective Layton what proof he had that the Social Security number on the bank statement I had was just a typo with my mother's bank account that she had open with my sister Claire Flowers. Detective Layton then hung up in my face when I asked him this. Detective Layton would never finish conversations with me over the phone. He would, what I would call it, duck and dodge my phone calls. And during this conversations we would have, he would do the same. Hang up the phone, duck and dodge. Detective Layton is originally from South Florida. Homestead, to be precise, is where he's originally from, here in South Florida, where I currently reside. So I feel like I have to be wary of this man, that he might try to have people hurt me here. I don't trust any of these people because my life is on the line, and my life has already been threatened verbally by attorney Floyd Melton III's middleman, hacker Derry Johnson, that used to work at Floyd Melton III's law firm up until 2008. I don't take death threats lightly, and I made a police report about the death threat I received from Derry Johnson. I will dedicate an episode solely to getting to know this individual on a later date, so you know more about who he is and how he is involved with my breach of fiduciary I have with my trust fund and Melton Law firm. Detective Layton essentially agreed with the white-collar attorney Floyd Melton III when he told him that I'm crazy and to not believe anything I'm telling them, that I was only just trying to find out information about my mother's estate. This is the perfect example of organized crime at its prime, running the judicial system and the police department in Greenwood, Mississippi. The white-collar attorneys at Melton Law Firm are making millions of dollars off of embezzling from their clients' assets and are laundering the money by buying residential, commercial, and farmland property with their ill-gotten gains. These crooks are making so much money that they are easily able to afford to pay people off. This is not unusual for white-collar attorneys to want to pay people off, to keep quiet, and to want to call like I own them. I was very disgusted and upset with the treatment I received from the Greenwood, Mississippi Police Department Criminal Division that I decided to take my complaint to the Chief of Police, Jody Bradley, with the Greenwood Police Department. I told Chief of Police Jody Bradley that his detective Layton was not investigating my case properly. I told the Chief of Police that his detective should have never have contacted the criminals and consulted with them and decided from their version of what was going on with my breach of fiduciary that I have with my trust fund that was the actual case. But there was not much I could do because in the end, Chief of Police Jody Bradley agreed with Detective Layton's findings with his investigation he conducted with my case. I argued with the Chief of Police over the phone and asked him why he didn't see that my mother's name was being used or had been used with identity theft and it was not a crime. He told me that the identity theft has a statute of limitation, and it's already run out, and there's nothing he can do about it. Chief Jody Bradley said that the identity theft that is associated with my case has a statute of limitation, and because it has a statute of limitation, then that's why they're not going to investigate my case any further because of the statute of limitations, and it has run out. Detective Layton said there is no crime being committed because it's a typo. Well, if it's a typo, then how was it that the Department of Treasury were able to identify World War II Series E bonds that my mother, Brenda B. Flowers, had cashed out under her name and another person's Social Security number? Because it's not a typo. I rest my case. If police officers are not doing their job, then they are not being a police officer and are possibly even being paid to stop the investigation on my case and close it. The white-collar attorneys at Melton Law Firm have been conducting their organized criminal enterprise while running the judicial system in the Mississippi Delta for over 20 years now. These people have everyone backing them up because they are so deeply politically connected. And don't forget, they run the judicial system. Police Chief Jody Bradley was determined to not have his detective Layton involved in reopening my investigation I have with my breach of fiduciary with my trust fund. Police Chief Jody Bradley told me because the identity theft involved with my case has a statute of limitations and it has already run out, but sorry, there's nothing he could do about it. First of all, the identity theft with my case wasn't clarified as indeed being identity theft until July 2020, when the Secret Service agent helping me my case, who goes by the name of Roger Kirby, gave me confirmation as to who the Social Security number belongs to, that my mother, Brenda B. Flowers, and attorney Floyd Melton Jr. and Trustmark Bank were using. I converged with an attorney that handles trust and estates, and he said, because I was unknowing, that if I ever owned World War II Series E bonds that were in my trust, and they were never mentioned to me in my final accounting, then the time when I found out about the identity theft, which was in July 2020, when I got confirmation from the Secret Service agent, then this should be the time when the identity theft should start with the statute of limitations. Well, there is a statute of limitations as well for embezzlement in the state of Mississippi. And that's what is also entailed within my breach of fiduciary I have with my trust. Here's the statute of limitations in the state of Mississippi with embezzlement. Embezzlement is exempt from having any statute of limitations at all in the state of Mississippi. This is a fact. The embezzlement of my trust fund is a crime that involved the criminal transfer of my property into another person's hands. The penalties in Mississippi regarding embezzlement charges will vary as to how much property is in question that was embezzled. Embezzlement cases involving greater value amounts involves larger penalties and longer jail sentences. My case is rather large because it's over 20 years of criminal activity white-collar attorneys are involved in, and they are looking at doing quite a bit of time in federal lockup, believe it or not. Hell, if I was white-collar Shriner attorney Floyd Melton Jr., and I was convicted of money laundering and identity theft with my breach of fiduciary, then I would be wary that I would die in prison and never get out. Because attorney Floyd Melton Jr. is already 76 years old. He's going to get at least 10 to 15 years for his involvement in my breach of fiduciary I have with my trust fund. I think he's going to do more than likely. He'll just die in prison. But that's just my opinion. Who knows, he might get out of jail when he's 100 and something years old and be alive. You never know. While the statute of limitations on the majority of crimes that have been committed in Mississippi is a prison term of up to 2 years, embezzlement is exempt from having any statute of limitations at all in the state of Mississippi. For most crimes in Mississippi, a person cannot wait more than 2 years before taking legal action and taking the case to court after the crime has been committed. However, in the cases of Mississippi embezzlement, such as my breach of fiduciary I have with my trust fund, the statute of limitations do not exist as the law considers these crimes to be such importance that prosecution should not be limited by time. So there is no statute of limitation for embezzlement in the state of Mississippi. Therefore, the police should have done their job and investigated my case properly. It's just that simple. It's not rocket science. It's common sense. I even told the police that I talked to a Trustmark Bank agent at Trustmark Bank in Greenwood, Mississippi, and she told me that the checking account was still open, but it was under another person's name that goes by the last name of Hayes. Once again, Police Chief Jody Bradley told me the identity theft has a statute of limitations, and he's just so sorry, but he's not going to be able to take the case and have his investigator reopen it. Instead, he referred me to have the Secret Service investigate my case for me. What is it going to take to indict and convict these white-collar attorneys and their fraudster co-conspirators for their crimes? It is of no surprise what they're doing while they're conducting their organized criminal enterprise in the Mississippi Delta. You can see how this is so by listening to my podcast episodes. You see as well just how powerful and corrupt the crooks are. Not only are they controlling the police station, they also control the U.S. Attorney's Office in Greenwood, Mississippi. So in a nutshell, these crooks control the judicial system in a small town in the Mississippi Delta while they are running a multi-million-dollar organized criminal enterprise. In the episodes in this podcast, they clearly explain how this is so. I hope you were able to clearly understand this from all that I have stated to you. If not, please comment in the comment section if you have any questions about my episode that you need clarity on. And this completes my true crime story about how the police in Greenwood, Mississippi and the U.S. Attorney's Office in Greenwood, Mississippi protect white-collar criminals and support them by not investigating them, these same white-collar criminals that are running the judicial system in the Mississippi Delta. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe and leave a comment. I'll see you next episode. Until then, goodbye, everyone.